All right, Big Bang. Today is Tuesday. It's July 18th. Welcome to the Dog Walk presented by Barstool Sports. Here with Chief as always. Chief, big week.
Huge.
Big week at the cinemas.
Yeah.
Movie blogs are like ripping apart Barstool right now. I saw Castellani wrote that it's not a great experience. Jeff D. Lowe clapped back, saying that movies are a magical experience. Robbie clapped back, saying that he had two people jerk off in a movie he was at before. So just a lot of talk about movies because...
What kind of movie was Bob seeing?
Someone beat off in the Polar Express, he said. And someone...
Shut up.
Yeah.
That's like, that person should be in jail for life, I feel like.
Yeah, of course.
Yeah. Did they get caught? I haven't seen the blog.
Yeah, no, I don't think so. He said he didn't know. He was too young, but his mom told him. But then someone beat off in Zero Dark 30 as well. So, yeah.
Dude, we got some twisted people.
Yeah.
Those are not jerk-off movies.
I mean, what?
No.
Yeah.
What? Like it,
I was going to say, what's a jerk-off movie?
You didn't have movies that when you were a kid that you're
like,
I'm gonna pause it here on the DVD because there's some tits out.
Yeah, but I don't think anything is a public jerk-off
No,
movie.
of course not. But it's like nothing is a public jerk-off.
Yes, exactly.
Okay, I want to go on the record. I want to make sure we're clear on that. Jesus Christ, I thought that was assumed, but I guess not.
You were making it seem like, all right, Titanic, when Rose comes out, if you want to pull it out, have a couple good minutes, and then...
No.
That's okay.
That's not what I was saying
all right, you sure?
Yeah, but it would be...
Clarify.
It would be one thing if it was like, you're a sick, twisted fuck no matter what.
Yeah.
But it's like, what's getting you aroused? Is it the scene where the guy's got a bag over his head and they're waterboarding him and blasting the music in Zero Dark 30? That's what I mean. Although I do love Jessica Chastain. Yeah. I love her. I love her redhead.
Yeah, she's great.
She's fucking great.
So leading into that,
it's Oppenheimer week.
It's Oppenheimer. It's Barbie week.
Mm-hmm. I thought Barbie was already out for some reason.
Nope. Mission Impossible came out last week. Mm-hmm. Indiana Jones 2 weeks ago.
Still haven't seen it, unfortunately.
Yeah, I'm gonna go soon.
Yeah. You're still getting caught up on.
Yeah. So I did all three.
Oh, you did all three.
Yeah.
Of Indiana Jones.
Yes.
Okay. Rank them while we're here.
I like Temple of Doom. It seems like that's
fucking bozo.
Besides Crystal Skull, which I'm watching now.
Yeah,
which I've seen before, but I'm just doing a refresher. And
I still haven't seen it.
Really?
Yeah, because of Shia LaBeouf.
But it's weird. It's like Rosalind and like Aliens. Like that's right up your alley. That's why I'm surprised.
It's Shia LaBeouf.
Oh, Shia's a good actor.
He's a fucking dink.
Well, by all accounts, yes. But dude, besides that one, it sounds like Temple of Doom is a redheaded stepchild. I kind of like Temple of Doom.
The best. Better than Last Crusade.
Last Crusade was fucking
awesome.
It had a couple lulls for me, but the strong points were strong.
Yeah, Sean Connery.
Yes.
Yeah,
but
the blonde was a minx in that one too.
Yes.
Yeah,
and like the ending was sick.
Sick ending.
Yeah.
The night.
Yes, the ending was awesome.
Yeah.
The beginning scene was sick.
I think my favorite is the Last Crusade.
Really?
I go Last Crusade. Lost Ark, Temple of Doom.
Lost Ark is 3 for me. I think.
The intro, and I think I texted this to you, but the intro, because you always have like the action sequence to start off where he's off doing something else. When he's in China or Shanghai or wherever he is, and he's getting poisoned, and they're kicking around the antidote, and then they're in a plane and they jump out of the plane over the Himalayas, and it's not a parachute, it's a fucking floating raft, and somehow like they all, it was just like too preposterous.
Yeah.
And then I hated the love interest in that one.
Yeah.
She was so annoying that she kind of like killed it a little bit.
For a franchise, it's wild that they just do new characters every time.
Except for him.
Yeah, except for him.
Yeah.
But still, it's like all these franchises bank on the familiarity of the audiences knowing who's coming and where,
Yeah, Star Wars kind of had. Harrison Ford did Star Wars in like 2014 because they kept them around. They kept those characters around forever. So.
I just really like the villain in Temple of Doom.
Kalima.
Yeah,
Kalima.
I really like the villains. Like I just like that. I thought it was cool visually.
I will say that the villains in Temple of Doom, It's weird to say some people are scarier than Nazis. Those people were fucking scary, dude.
Yes,
where they
exactly.
rip your fucking heart out of your chest. Kalima.
Don't sleep on temples, dude. I'm telling you.
Kalima.
Yeah, I'm selling you.
They dunk them in like the fucking lava pit.
Yeah. Short round.
The
bridge.
The voodoo shit.
I'm selling you.
I mean, I still like it, but it's definitely third for me.
Yeah.
Yeah.
All right.
Anyways.
I'm going to get killed for that, but whatever.
It's happened before.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Just being honest. Mm-hmm. But so yeah, we're going to talk about Oppenheimer today.
Yeah.
Specifically like the story behind it or what exactly?
Yeah, kind of like some of the dark secrets around it. I'm very interested. It's supposed to be a super long movie, and it's basically the whole movie. I saw an interview with Matt Damon about it where he like read the script and it was written in the first person. Like it's just all told through like Oppenheimer's eyes, and it's Cillian Murphy as Oppenheimer, and they look eerily similar. It's like the perfect casting in terms of like what the guy looked like. And they really, it seems in all the trailers and things that I've seen where it's like Oppenheimer is the hero and this Manhattan Project is like a race against time to like save the war, save the American war effort and end the war and all this stuff. And there is like a dark side to this where like I don't think that, people realize that there were multiple, and perhaps Oppenheimer himself, which we'll get into, were Soviet spies while this was all going on. So I don't know if they get into that story or not. Obviously, the movie comes out Thursday. I have my tickets, but I haven't seen it yet. So I don't know if they're telling are they portraying him as like this hero
Or the villain.
or are they just telling the whole story, which is this is a guy who had his top secret security clearance snatched from him in 1953 because of suspicions that he was, not even suspicions, he was a communist. He was a communist. So you're talking about the height of the Cold War and all this, and there's like more and more evidence keeps coming out that, there was, and we'll get into some of these other dark characters too and other dark things that happened in and around the Manhattan Project.
Okay. Before we start, though, I do want to talk about HelloFresh. We got a nice promo code here for you. If you're unfamiliar with HelloFresh, take a bite out of summer with HelloFresh. Mm-hmm. From chef-crafted seasonal recipes to their new fresh and fit summer menu, HelloFresh brings flavor right to your door. It has pre-portioned ingredients to help you cut down on food waste, while step-by-step instructions make cooking a breeze, not a chore. Make your home the hangout place this summer in crowd-pleasing eats. From a backyard bratwurst bar to tangy key lime pie, HelloFresh Market makes summer entertaining a cinch. Okay? It's peak time for summer produce, and HelloFresh makes sure you get all the best picks all season long. Their ingredients travel from farm to your door in less than 7 days for quality you can taste. They also have options when it comes to what you want for dinner. It's not just the same old thing all the time. They have over 40 recipes to choose from every single week, so you'll never get bored and can always find something new to try and love. And when you need dinner fast, don't call for delivery. Think HelloFresh. Think their fresh and fast recipes are ready in just 15 minutes or less. Plus, HelloFresh is 25% cheaper than takeout. Listen, we've all had it here. HelloFresh is no strangers to the advertising podcast game, so
Yeah.
It's good stuff. It's one of those things where, like, creatures of habit will just eat the same stuff over and over again.
Can I make a confession?
Yeah.
When it comes to cooking or really anything positive in my life this last 6 weeks or so, I have been a bum. I need HelloFresh. I've been ordering takeout way too much. It's so expensive.
Yeah.
It really adds up when it's like, I think I'll get that, $12 whatever skillet, and then it gets to your door and it's $28, and it's just like, it's for a skillet. We're talking about probably $4 of ingredients. So HelloFresh is way cheaper. You don't have to go to the grocery store. It just shows up right there. It's going to be better for you. You're going to be able to make it it'll be done faster than the delivery would get there.
For sure.
So it just makes too much sense.
So go to HelloFresh.com/Chicago50. Use code Chicago50 for 50% off plus free shipping. That's HelloFresh.com/Chicago50. Then use code Chicago50 for 50% off plus free shipping. All right, Chief. Oppenheimer.
All right. So there's so many like ways to think about this Oppenheimer and the Manhattan Project. The impetus for starting it was actually from a little guy named Albert Einstein. Did you know that?
No.
So Einstein fled Europe when the Nazis took over. You know, he's a Jewish scientist. He's like, I'm going to get out while the getting is good, you know. Smart, got ahead of that. And then he, in 1939, he wrote an urgent letter to FDR saying like, hey, we got a problem here with these Nazis. Like, they're starting to mine these, you know, plutonium, uranium, all these different types of newer heavy elements that are used for these explosive devices. You know, that could be the most powerful weapon ever created that will level a city. So upon reading that was the thing that really kind of kicked off the idea for the Manhattan Project. And I think the movie, it looks like, from what I've seen, is going to center around this race to defeat Hitler and the Nazis and get the bomb before they were, because it's like, if whoever gets this thing first is going to rule the world. Mm-hmm. And if you see what Hitler is doing across Europe, all he has to do is fly a bomber over New York City and level New York City. And it's like the war is over. So it was like this race against the Nazis and these German scientists to see who could come up with the atomic bomb faster, right? So they start this project, and it's, you know, they build this city in New Mexico, you know, this Los Alamos, where they have all the top people in the world, and it's centered around Oppenheimer. And he, you know, but it was, this whole thing was, we have to get it before Hitler. We have to get it before Hitler. All, you know, okay. Well, then you get to 1945. Okay, the project has been underway for years. They have basically built the bomb. Hitler dies. Okay, you know, allegedly kills himself. The war in Europe is over. And then it was like, fuck. Like, it got to the point where they've been working on this for so long that there's a lot of evidence to suggest that, like, Oppenheimer became almost like an advocate for using it, because it's like you invest so much time into that it's like, we want to see this thing in action. And so then that's, you know, FDR dies, and then it's like the war in Europe has been wrapped up, and now it's like you're shifting your focus on Japan. And they were like, okay, like, the argument at the time was, well, we can just invade Japan. It'll be a fucking slog, because they've been doing the island hopping for years. And you hear the stories of Iwo Jima and all these places, and where you're just, you know, you're losing way more. You have more casualties in the Pacific, and the Japanese just fight to the, you know, they have that kamikaze thing where they will not surrender. Like, there's that story, I think we've talked about it at a different podcast, where there was this guy who was like the last survivor on some island, and they found him in the Pacific. He was like a 65 or older. You know, they found him like 70 years after the war had ended, and he was just like, well, no one told me. So I was still holding, like, this was my position, and I'm just holding out because we're at war, and I'm just holding out here. He's just on guard on some fucking rocky little shithole island in the middle of the Pacific. But that's like how they were. Like, I'm never surrendering. So it's like, and that was on these little islands that they didn't care about and weren't even part of their mainland, except for, like, the, you know, Okinawa was probably the closest thing, and that was just like the most, you know, brutal, bloodiest fighting for inches. So it's like, if you invade mainland Japan, you get all the citizens are like that samurai spirit, and this, you know, we have to defend the emperor, this whole thing. They're saying, well, you might lose 1 million people. That was the argument, okay, for using it. And we didn't want to, like, we wanted to own Japan after the war. We didn't want to split it with the Russians, which are right next door, like they had to carve up Germany. Right? We don't want to, you know, we want to have that be our area, because they're already worried about the Russians. So they decided to drop the bomb. They made 2 bombs. They're like, let's use both of them. So I think they dropped one. I think it was like on the 6th, and the other one was on the 9th. I think of June. Fat Man and Little Boy. They killed 200,000 plus people, like that, and they're all civilians. So it's like, that is kind of like the dark side of Oppenheimer too, which is kind of what this episode is about, which is like, what kind of guy really was this? And he knew what that bomb was, because he immediately afterwards, he had the quote where he quoted like the Hindu scripture where he was like, I'm Vishnu, I'm the destroyer of worlds. And it was like, if they never dropped it, it was, people speculate now, would they be making a movie about him? You know, like he wanted his name out there. He did a million press things afterwards and talking about all this, you know, the Manhattan Project and how it came together and then like was flipped on a dime and was like, we can never use these again, blah, 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 blah. But it was like people speculate it was like a little bit of his motivation and his advocacy for using the bomb was to like carve his name in history forever. That he was like, you know, almost he was the scientist, mad or not, that came up with this project and developed this and made it happen. And now we have nuclear bombs and nuclear energy basically because of him. But it was like, was that worth it? Which is an interesting discussion too, because if you think about, you know, people talk about the Cold War and now the bombs have gotten so advanced that, you know, you think back to like we've talked about the Cuban Missile Crisis before, that would have been the end of the world, right? Because the bombs are so powerful and there's so many of them that if you trigger a nuclear war, that's it for the human race because they could blow up the entire world literally like he's a destroyer of worlds. But it's been at the same time, we haven't had like a massive outbreak war like World War II or World War I since the development of nuclear weapons. So in a way, and it's probably because it's such a deterrent, like we can't go to war with Russia or any other nuclear nation because it will go down a path where everybody's dead. So it almost serves as a deterrent. So you can make an argument that like while it can kill everyone on the planet, could you argue that it saved lives too? Which,
yeah.
What do you think?
I was going to say that, but I didn't know if that was like a strange or a hot take.
I don't think it is.
You know, like
I don't think it is.
At the expense of what happened in Japan. Like, you know.
Yeah. Or even just every war going forward.
Yeah.
Like we had Vietnam, we had some of these other conflicts, and obviously Russia, Ukraine right now is terrible. You know, we've had other conflicts, but we haven't had like a World War I or a World War II since the invention of the nuclear bomb. And none have been used since Hiroshima and Nagasaki. Because it's like we saw that, we're like, well, let's put that shit back in the box. Let's make a bunch of them just in case.
Yeah.
But let's put it back in the box.
Yeah.
And that's where, you know, we go back to the other thing where it's like they had to do all these kind of sick and like they're doing like the testing on the nuclear energy and the nuclear explosions, but they also had to do all these tests. They called them HPs, where the code human projects. Okay, they injected 18 different people who were just like normal citizens with plutonium just to see what it would do. Okay. So like they had like these evil experiments that they were doing on people where they had this one woman, her name was Janet Stat, and she had fled, I think she fled Belarus, and she fled Belarus for New York City. And then she went in for a medical treatment. They're like, why don't we put you in this room over here as part of this, you know, Manhattan. They had different hospitals as part of the Manhattan Project. And they injected her all at once with 54 times the amount of radiation that a human will get in their entire lifetime. Because you get radiation from all sorts of things, right? You watch TV, your fucking Wi-Fi, the sun, eat a banana, like all these different things have like some low levels of radiation. So you have radiation exposure, X-rays all the time, but it's like there's a limit, okay? They gave her 54 times what she would have gotten in a lifetime just via injection with plutonium. And the result was she spent the next 29 years of her life fighting cancer and died. And there was a ton of stories like that where they're doing all these different human experiments to the point, and these things weren't leaked until the 90s. Like these documents weren't declassified until the 90s. And it caused Congress to formally, you know, write it into law to ban secret human testing. Like you have to, like same thing with like MK Ultra, which was like the CIA thing where like we're going to test psychedelics on people. Whereas like, yeah, you can't just take American citizens and inject them with shit to see what happens for like the Cold War effort. Like it's like that's like super fucked up. And that's like another thing with Oppenheimer. There's records of him being like, I don't want this happening in my lab. So they like kind of outsourced it to other people who were in the project. But it was like he would sign off on the shipments of plutonium and uranium to these other sites where they were conducting the medical tests to see, because they're trying to come up with treatments. So, hey, if we get into a nuclear war or we have soldiers that are impacted by this, we need to know how to treat them. So we have to poison these people with the stuff to then try to figure out how to treat them.
What was the horrifying one we did? Unit 587 or something?
Yeah, that was Japanese against. That one is like
insane
because
they're all insane though, to be honest.
Yeah, but that was just like they're trying to test like unit 571, I think.
Yeah, something like that.
And they would do that was just like, how do we torture people the best?
And yeah, how would they respond?
Right. And they did the thing where they would throw water on people that were in freezing temperatures outside. 731 until their skin would just split open and peel off.
Yeah.
It was like the most horrifying shit you've ever heard of. And for just testing the limits of the human body. And we'll use these Chinese serfs basically as our test experiments. It was super fucked up. But this, we do all sorts of fucked up shit too, like these experiments. There was another one where they, there was a school and a hospital, like basically a mental institution in the 50s in Waverly, Massachusetts, where they exposed children because these are the mentally handicapped children. Let's fuck them. We'll give them the radiation and test it out on them. So they like knowingly gave these children who are mentally incapacitated all this radiation poisoning so they can just study the effects of it. That was in the 50s. Like that's like your grandparents are alive, like it's not that long ago that people were making these decisions. And again, like these are things that have been declassified. And then there was another thing at Mass General Hospital in Boston where they did the same thing. They took 11 people and gave them, they were like, oh, we're going to treat your cancer. And it was like, no, we're actually just going to give you, plutonium, weapons grade plutonium, and inject and see what it does. And of course, like they all died. Mm-hmm. And again, all this stuff wasn't released until like 40, 50 years later in the 1990s. So all kinds of stuff. And it was like, that was, you could kind of like the difference between Albert Einstein and maybe Oppenheimer is that Einstein seemed to have, at least in quotes, maybe more of a genuine conscience than Oppenheimer. Because Einstein was like, had I known the Nazis weren't going to be able to like do the tech, I never would have lifted a finger. I wouldn't have said anything to Roosevelt, because it's like he knew the implications of like what a nuclear bomb meant. And Oppenheimer, even after like Hitler was defeated and there was no threat of the Japanese getting it, but like there was a threat of the Russians. And then that goes back to maybe the threat from the Russians really came from Oppenheimer and this other guy, Klaus Fuchs, which I had never even heard that name before. When I hear Fuchs, I think of the show Barry, like the bad guy, like the brains of the operation. Yeah, and Barry, I wonder if they did that on purpose. I'm sure they did. But my whole life, I'd always heard about how did the Russians get the ability to do a nuclear bomb? And I always heard about the Rosenbergs, right? The Julius and Ethel Rosenberg. So they were convicted of espionage and given the chair. And in 1995, the government declassified documents that showed prosecutors knew that Ethel Rosenberg had nothing to do with it. So Julius Rosenberg was definitely a Soviet spy and was giving them information. But when they decoded all these cables, and they would have like Julius Rosenberg had a code name. His code name was Antenna. Ethel had no code name because they were like, she doesn't matter. So the Americans knew this, but they didn't want to tip off to the Russians that they could kind of decode their stuff. So they just had to like cast them and paint them as this super spy, couple where they're both doing shit. Ethel didn't know anything. They gave her the chair basically just to throw the Russians off the scent. So like, that's what I mean. Like Cold War, like the mindset was just like, I fucked that woman's life. She's just like, she was just a housewife. and they gave her the chair. And again, those documents came out in 1995. So it's like one of those things where until I was researching for this, I didn't know that about Ethel Rosenberg. Like she was, to me, like I was like, oh, like she was always like the villain, because that was the story I'd always heard. That was the Rosenbergs together were the Soviet spies who stole that shit. And but that wasn't the case at all. It was her husband, and her husband was working with this guy, Harry Gold, who was a Soviet spy, and Klaus Fuchs, for sure, who was like a very like I haven't looked this up either. Probably pull this up, see if he's featured in the movie at all. If somebody plays him, because he was like a very prominent. Oh yeah, so he does have he's going to be played by a guy named Christopher Denham, which I don't really know who Christopher Denham is, if I'm being honest. But Christopher Denham plays Klaus Fuchs, and Klaus Fuchs, same thing. He fled Nazi Germany, ended up in England. He's known as like having this photographic memory, like one of the most brilliant people ever. But he was also a fucking communist. Like he was active member of the Communist Party in Great Britain, because people like forget that, or maybe they just didn't know. Early 20th century the Nazi idea and the communist idea were just like, I don't know, it won't be like the equivalent of like the Green Party or like some of these other like political movements today, where they weren't like, you didn't have the 20th century to be like, oh yeah, that's fucking bad. They were just like these political ideas of, hey, like maybe this would be a better form of government. We should try this out. And because nobody had ever really put communism or Nazism into practice. So there's that story about how, I think it was in the 20s, you know, there's a Great Depression, or maybe it was the 30s, a Great Depression going on. And so everybody was just disenchanted with the way that the American government worked. The Nazis had a rally in New York City, and they sold out Madison Square Garden. Okay, so that it was a
before,
yeah, it's like kind of and it's like, it sounds so wild to hear knowing what we know now, but back then it was just like, man, fuck our government, like our government, like maybe we should try this other thing. And now it's obviously like you put it into practice, and they're like the worst people in the world. Same thing with communism. There was a big communist movement in England, France, Italy, Greece, all these places leading up to World War II and after World War II had very strong communist parties that were making power pushes. And this guy, Klaus Fuchs, was part of that. Like he fled Germany because he was a communist, because Hitler hated the communists. Hitler saw the communists as his biggest like competitor, so to speak. So he fled there to be like, well, I'm a communist, I better get the fuck out of here. He goes to Great Britain. He's this brilliant scientist. Obviously the British had involvement in this Manhattan Project too. They sent him, he was like their envoy to Los Alamos, and he literally gave the plans for one of the first nuclear bombs directly to Harry Gold, who was a Soviet spy, and gave it to the Russians.
Damn.
So, and then they were like, well, why did you do that? He goes, because I'm a communist. Because he admitted to it in 1949. He only did 9 years in jail in Great Britain, and then he went to live in East Germany as a communist for the rest of his life. But they were like, why would you do that? Like, why? He's like, well, I believe in Stalin, and I'm a fucking communist, so of course I did it. Why wouldn't I do it? It was basically like, but the whole thing was that the Russians thought, or everybody thought the Russians, in 1946, they have like the UN Council, right? And the Russian ambassador gets up like, hey, we have no plans of making a nuclear bomb. And everyone's like, bullshit. Like, we absolutely know. But people were saying that because of how long it took them to do the Manhattan Project, that and how expensive it was, and they're rebuilding, they're like, they probably won't be able to get anything until like the mid 50s. Okay, it was like they probably won't be able to figure out this tech until the mid 50s. They got it in 1949. They set off their first nuclear explosion, and it was basically a carbon copy of what they had developed and what they had dropped on the Japanese. And it was because this guy Klaus Fuchs just gave them the blueprint. So all the trial and error that the United States had to do in all the investment, they were able to create their first atomic bomb in a fraction of the time and a fraction of the money, because they just had like a step-by-step guide on how to do it. So that's how the Soviets got it, was from this guy Klaus Fuchs. And then there's been documents that have come out even more recently that Oppenheimer too was working with Soviet spies while he was at Los Alamos. So from 1942 to 1944, like the peak of the project, he was giving information. Allegedly, there's this thing called the Merkulov letter, where and it's debated like how real it is, and then it's like there's other letters that are like from Soviet intel where they're basically saying like, yeah, Oppenheimer himself is giving us information. And Oppenheimer, they're saying, well, we're on the same side of the war at that point, so he was just sharing documents with us, but it would have broken the Espionage Act. Like, he would have been put to death just like the Rosenbergs. So the Russians always just kind of dismissed it, and they tried to like muddy the waters about if the documents were real or not. They kind of dismissed their own internal leaks, be like, these are fakes. And when Putin came, he was on Larry King Live back in the year 2000, and Larry King asked him about it. He goes, oh yeah, because Putin was KGB, right? Like he was like, we still protect our assets, but we had American scientists leaking us information from the Manhattan Project during World War II. And he's like, I won't say names, but it was just like, oh, well, who the fuck else would it be? Supposedly it was Klaus, Oppenheimer, and one other guy. But like, and then the other thing that Oppenheimer was, there's been speculation where he was like, one country can't be the only person, or the only power rather, with the nuclear bomb, because they just decide the world order and they can just bully whatever they want all the way through. So there was like the thinking that he was a communist. He was part of the American Communist Party in the lead up, like in the 30s. And then when he was questioned under like McCarthyism about when he was getting his clearance taken away, he said that he was not a communist, but he called himself a quote unquote fellow traveler, meaning that he sympathized with a lot of their views. So the guy Klaus Fuchs was like, yo, Stalin's the man and I'm a fucking communist. He was like, I think their ideas are all right, but I wouldn't say I'm a communist, like a capital C communist, maybe like a lowercase c, like I just kind of sympathize. But there was like all this evidence that like he was helping them, and then he was helping them because he was a communist himself, but then also was like, we can't just it'll be bad for the world order if one country and one country alone has the nuclear bomb. And that's kind of like this, like the underbelly of Oppenheimer, is that he could have been playing both sides of the fence there for a long time. It's kind of crazy.
It is.
The Cold War, the 20th century is
just,
fucking wild.
For real.
Yeah.
Now this made me a lot more excited for the movie.
Yeah. If I don't know
to
if
see like what kind of angle
it.
they're going to take.
Yeah. It's almost like it could be two parts. Like I suspect that the movie will end almost with like his quote, like, I am Vishnu, the destroyer of worlds, which he said after they had figured out how to actually do it. But there's like this whole other story where he, the Cold War part of the story.
Yeah.
And his involvement in that. And I don't know. I feel like you could do a sequel to this. Yeah,
and especially he's going to have Nolan involved, so who knows what twist he's going to add to
Oppenheimer
it.
too.
Yeah. So,
and I want to say that movie, The Bridge of Spies. I could have this wrong, but that might have to do with like Klaus Fuchs and Harry Gold.
Yeah,
that might be. I could have that wrong, but no, that's a different thing.
Just get a little primer, Chief.
Yeah.
Before the movie. So, thanks for that.
Mm-hmm.
And I said,
you're going Thursday.
I don't know if I'm going Thursday, but
Okay.
I on the rundown yesterday I committed to doing the double feature.
The Barbie one.
Yeah.
Okay.
And I think you got to go Oppenheimer first, and then like have a chaser with Gosling and Margot Robbie.
Go back to back.
Yeah.
I think we said on the rundown, or maybe here, like when that trailer came out, that I was not opposed to seeing the Barbie movie.
I was gonna see it regardless, but
Isn't Oppenheimer supposed to be like almost 3 hours long?
yes, and Barbie's like almost 2.
Okay, I can't do 5 hours.
I know. I
Yeah.
got Clem and Robbie held a gun to my head, and they're like, "You better." And I can't say no to those guys.
What's your take on the? I mean, do you think the movie theater experience is not what it used to be?
I mean, I love it.
Jerk offs aside.
I love it.
Yeah, so do I.
Here's the problem. My biggest con is when you get a bad theater, when you get people who are talking.
Yeah.
That's the biggest issue. So like you got to kind of pick and choose when you go. I tend to stay away from, unless if it's like really on my list, I tend to stay away from opening nights.
Yeah.
I
think it depends
also,
on the movie too.
It depends on the movie too.
Yeah.
Like certain things, like I went to go see Smile, a horror movie, and I saw it on Monday, and it was like schools were off that day. Or I saw it on a Sunday night, and schools were off on Monday, and it was just all high school kids just being jag-offs, you know?
Being high school kids.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
And I'm like, you can't get mad because I was
Yeah.
them. But it's severely, it could enhance a movie, and it could
The
really,
crowd?
yes.
I don't think I've ever been to a movie where I thought the audience enhanced the movie.
Really?
Yeah.
I think
I don't want
when
anybody
it comes
cheering.
to laughter, though, like laughter can be contagious, and like you could,
I suppose.
Yeah.
That kind of reminds me of my dad. I think we were watching. This was a long time ago when 30 Rock was on, where we'd be sitting around the family, like, and we'd have 30 Rock on, and he would get pissed if people laughed out loud because he's like, "You're gonna make me miss the next joke." so I kind of feel that way in the theater. Like I don't want people laughing too much. I also don't like some of those franchise movies. I feel like the people like cheer and stuff. Like I don't want that. Mm-hmm. And then I went to, this was like the weirdest movie experience I've ever had in the theater. I went to Music Box Theater up in Southport for a double feature during Christmas time. It's a Wonderful Life and White Christmas. And you know the guy Potter, right? The character who's one of the most evil guys ever in the It's a Wonderful Life. Every single time he came on screen, people would hiss. Like the whole audience would hiss, like loudly. It was,
that's weird.
yeah, like the first time I'm like, oh, like that's kind of funny. And then they did it for an hour and a half. Yeah.
That's so weird.
It was very weird.
Yeah, like that's the thing. Like
that
if you
kinda
get a bad
ruined
crowd,
it.
like,
yeah.
you know, and I saw The Irishman in theaters. It's like over 3 hours, and I had an old lady behind me. Yep. After everything, and I'm like, I was like ready to fucking kill this lady.
Yeah.
I was like, shut up.
Shut the fuck up,
I never
lady.
say anything. I'm such a pussy.
You've never, not even once?
I mean, I have for sure.
Do the half turn?
I have before, but like it's always old people too.
I know.
Like, remember that one we saw 80 for Brady? That lady took a FaceTime in the middle of the theater. What
Yeah,
are we doing?
But we're in her environment.
Yeah, true.
That's her movie. We were on her
Fonda, yeah.
turf. Yeah. So
And truthfully,
where
though,
are you?
what I like the most is it's the only place that I could put my phone down
I do love that
and not
too.
check it once.
I like that too.
I really value that.
Yeah.
So
You ever worry that you get out and you check your notifications and it's like, it says like the 20 plus thing on Twitter? Do you feel oh fuck, I missed something?
Oh yeah, all the time. But like, you try to go on like a Monday night, you know?
Yeah.
I'll do like a solo Monday or something.
I used to love the Solo movie.
That's great.
When I would travel for work, and instead of like just going to bed or just sitting in a hotel, I saw Star Wars, like the first one, the first new one, like 3 times in the theaters, just because it was something to do. And I think I saw Big Short multiple times in the theaters too.
And the popcorn, obviously.
Yeah,
It's great.
yeah. You gotta have the good popcorn.
Yeah.
And I like sour. That's the only place I eat Sour Patch Kids too.
There you go.
Yeah.
All right, everybody. That's it for today. Thank you for listening. Thank you for watching. Back tomorrow with a free swim. We'll see you there.